So what's the old man up to now? Nothing constructive, I can assure you. And I got the little tractor today because I want to see if I can pull these ones I cut last night at least down to the road where I can hook onto them with the bigger tractors. And if the little tractor has no trouble pulling, I'll just pull them up to the landing. And I have a couple more on this hillside I want to work to get, you know, today to finish off the job and just be done. And if I can get them with that small tractor, you know, crawling around the hillside, being smaller and more nimble and all that, that saves me having to hook up the skidder winch today. And then when I'm done with this job, you know, I can take a little bit of a breather and then hook up the skidder winch to the big International and start in on the next phase of clearing these woods, which is going to be getting rid of that beech. And since I found a buyer, see if I can get, I don't know, 50, maybe more of the smaller beech up there on the landing and sell that off. If not, I'll sell it for firewood, right? So what I got to do is just kind of push some of this stuff out of the way, and then I can hook onto this log and drag it right down. And that's really the goal for the next half hour, 45 minutes. And of course I got to cut the top out of this like I did over there. I don't know, where am I going to cut it? That's a little bit lumpy for a log. I may take it afterwards, you know, I might do some of that, but I'm going to cut it right here, drag the main section up, and then maybe cut some more out of that Y and drag it up and see if they'll buy it. I actually have a whole bunch of that, you know, borderline wood out there, and the small tractor is actually perfect to go get it. You know, tops that are probably, you know, 10, 12 inches in diameter, almost a saw log, definitely good firewood. You know, when they get full of knots, they're not worth anything to me. I don't think I can get any wood out of them, which means the mill can't. So I just leave them for firewood. You know, that tree right there, I took it because I want to start opening this area up, get the canopy opened up a little bit. So, but I don't expect to get a lot of money out of it. I really don't. That soft maple number 1 and number 2 is just all full of knots and stuff. And next year we're going to go that way, do another chunk of about 15-20 acres. You know, but I wanted to get to that tree right there with my arbitrary line. And I'm leaving a lot of that, you know, 15 to 18 inch wood. You know, hopefully it'll come back and repopulate. But I really do have to come and thin out this beech before it just takes over. And I shouldn't ever do this. Never, ever, ever, ever a good idea to really pay a whole lot of attention to what happens online. Because so many people just have an agenda, you know, be it selling a brand or selling a strategy or whatever it is. And I try really, really hard to avoid that. I don't consider myself an expert, and I'm not really trying to sell anything. Again, I've said that a bunch of times. I don't know if people get it because a lot of people just simply aren't hardwired to understand that way of thinking. You know, that I don't have that competitive urge anymore. I've been there, done that, raced motorcycles, sold stuff, all kinds of things. At this point in my life, I just want to share life and, you know, look for the positives and share that with people with a positive attitude. That's really the definition of win. Not whether somebody sees what I'm doing as the right way, the only way, the best way, or any crap like that. I couldn't care less. Really couldn't. So one of the ongoing arguments that have been, you know, propagated online for the longest time, actually there's 2 of them. One is that the Husqvarna 500 series are junk because they're auto-tunes and all kinds of stuff. You know what I say to that is, if you don't like them, don't buy them. As simple as that. Well, the evidence that gets used is every once in a while there'll be a failure or a few failures, and then that gets turned into, you know, this evidence that the supposition is true, is they had a few failures. And of course that's without any true understanding of what created those failures. It could be a bunch of things. It could be the saw, it could be the design, but it also could be environmental, it could be the operators, it could be habits. I mean, I can't tell you how many times, you know, I'd get a series of saws from a particular customer that were failing, that weren't failing with other customers, to find out things like, you know, they like to keep the chain real tight in the bar, you know, stressing the PTO bearing, you know. 50 to 1 with a subpar oil. Dull chains. They sharpen them all the time. I saw this at Highway, and never touch the rakers. Go out there and the damn saw just screams its guts out, and after a few weeks, all of a sudden they have a top end failure. So there's so many things. And I guess my takeaway on all that is simply this. You know, having worked on 2 major brands and having a fair amount of exposure, is if it's manufactured by man, also being an ex-manufacturing engineer, if it's made by man, there's going to be problems and failures. And new designs will probably have them more than old designs because they haven't had a chance to be debugged. It's just the way it is. I don't care what the brand is. You know, and that's no different for Husky, Stihl, Makita, any of them. You know, a new design concept gets out into the field, all the special conditions that a person or a product is going to see in the field just far exceeds what the engineers are going to think about when they're trying to design their concepts. It's just the way it is. And then they, you know, they hone the product. And the Husky is about a generation ahead of everybody else with the auto-tune and efficient saws. So, of course, they're at the bleeding edge. Witnessed the first generation of 562s with the 5-screw cases. Well, the other manufacturers, they pile on. They learn from that experience, and you would think that they might be a little further ahead of the curve just based on watching the experience of their competitors, and that may or may not be true. But I guess my point is this. You work on saws, you're going to see catastrophic issues. You're going to see carnage from time to time, be it from a company, from a brand, from a series of saws. It's just going to happen. But that doesn't damn the entire product concept. There's a few out there that probably deserve to be, you know, but for the most part, the pro level 500s have been, you know, pretty stable over time. There's been examples of companies that blow them up, and were a couple of runs of bearings that were bad in different models at different times. But statistically, they're really no worse than anything else. That's what I've seen. So I don't get into it. I just don't. And when you see a person, you know, grab onto an incident and then try to blow it into a movement as if that defines the entire product line, there's your first clue that you've got a zealot and probably shouldn't pay a whole lot of attention. You know what I'm saying? One of the reasons you see stuff like that is a guy who simply wants to work on one brand versus another. And some are more aggressive about promoting that and more aggressive about trying to attack what they would consider either competition or something they don't want to deal with. And when you see that, there's another one to avoid. Just don't get into it. It's not worth it. They have their own people. They're fun. Do good stuff, their own community, but don't let it get under your skin. It's just not worth it. And it's usually bullshit anyway. So there's my little lecture for the morning. Having said that, I'm going to take my 562 Hilltop Saw Shop Special that was built from a 2014, you know, in the hit zone of problem area 562s and continue to run it because it's still going. And it's tired. And it needs to be refreshed. I think I've got a leak inside the carburetor. You know, sometimes it won't pump up, and that's pretty common on those. But they're, you know, it's still cutting. It's not doing anything catastrophic, no bearing failures, nothing like that. Just a typical saw thing, you know, just what saws do. I'm going to run it, and I'm going to run it with a 28-inch bar just to make a point. Actually, I started putting the 28 on that bar last week, and I have to honestly say that I was surprised at how well it pulled it. I did not expect that. You know, a 70cc saw with a 28 is a pretty nice combination for me. You know, with a full house chain, not a skip or nothing like that. You know, and the reason is I get enough power. It's not going to win any races, but I have enough power to get my work done, and it doesn't wear me out. So when I find that saw, the little 60, which is even a few pounds lighter, and vibrates so much less. And another factor, power equals fuel usage. It just doesn't make as much horsepower as a bigger saw, therefore it doesn't burn as much fuel. And plus it's an efficient design. You add all that up, I really am going to explore going back to my 562 concept, but using a little bit longer bar for the kind of work I do around here, and just see whether or not it doesn't buy me a little more convenience. I have a light bar on that. It's the Sujihara painted in husky colors. I had gotten that bar for the 565 because really I was trying to make it even more useful. I would say the 565 is the gold standard for a saw for my use around here. You know, my preferences, the way it delivers power, the weight, vibration, fuel usage, all that stuff. It's really right now the saw, the beat. It set the bar even over a 572, you know. But if this little hot rod 562 can do the same kind of things with less vibration, using less fuel and less weight, you're damn right I'm going to explore it. Sure I am, you know. Especially if I can take the old beaters that everybody thinks is blown up and no good, and you know, put a short block in them and make them useful for cheap. You know, that's the same kind of logic as that big G395. You know, taking something for less money and making it very, very useful for you. Anyway, I'm off on a tangent, but I think you get my drift. You know, I don't really have an agenda. I'm not trying to sell that as a concept. I'm just sharing my world, my experience. And, you know, as I kind of ramble through the saw world, trying to figure out ways of getting the work done I need done without falling into fad, you know, traps or spending god-awful amount of money I don't have to spend, you know what I'm saying? So, back to the task at hand. Let's see if we can get these two logs either right down to the road there, which would be good enough, or even up to the landing with that little dinky tractor, which is kind of the same concept of using the 562 to cut these 28 to 30 inch beasts. So, and oh, I want to just harp on one more point. And if you've been watching the channel, you might be wondering how come I'm not bore cutting through the hinge on this last set of trees. Well, I've said it 1,000 times, but I don't know if it makes sense, but this really is a graphic illustration. This kind of tree that I'm cutting right here, these soft maples, they really aren't stringy. They don't pull. They don't pull like the ash trees. So I don't have a need to. That combined with the kind of extreme leans they have, well, I need more hinge. So you add those two factors up, and you end up with a cut like this, where I leave a full hinge, and notice it doesn't pull enough to matter. I did get a little bit of a pull right there. You can see that hole. But, and the other thing is, you might think that I'm leaving a tall stump, but we really are on a steep hillside. So this one and that one and a few others, you'll see the high side. I mean, I get the saw right down into the dirt, you know, if I can. And you know, if I was going to cut and push these downhill, you would see a Western style Humboldt cut. You really would, because I have the room to do it. And that dirt pile back there defines where the back cut starts, and I would have plenty of room to get my 70 degrees notch, you know, starting from the bottom. But unfortunately, I'm going that way. So you kind of do a modified, do what I do. So there's one. I've got a bunch like this now, full hinge, but no pulls. Where if I had done that very same thing with an ash, it would have pulled halfway up into the freaking tree. You know, but on these they break nice and clean. You know, the hinge breaks real clean. Like this one right here. You can see I didn't have a lot of room to work with right here, but I had plenty on this side. So again, if I was pushing it downhill, a Humboldt cut would have made all kinds of sense. Now this one did in fact pull up a little bit. You know, I lost maybe 2 or 3 inches, so you can theoretically say that it would have benefited from a bore cut from the front. But my rule of thumb is if I'm not seeing pulls any more than like this on the trees, I'll just keep doing what I'm doing. I started seeing more of that. See that right here? Going into the tree instead of down into the stump. Well, then you're going to start seeing bore cuts from the front again. You know what I'm saying? And you just sort of take it as it comes. You know, as you learn the different species of trees and the ones you have on the job that you're working on, you know, you sort of modify your cut technique to fit the situation at hand. Anyway, let me set the camera down and do a little tractor work and then see if I can skid this thing off the hill. Alright, I think I have a path to drag these two logs. So let me cut this one out and then get to it. Well, that was really ugly. You couldn't see it on film because I didn't have the camera on. But I got it down the hill and then realized it was more log than that poor little thing could handle, you know? So I had it low, four-wheel drive, rear end all locked up, and it was all that tractor could do to get it up to the landing. So what I'm going to do is just bring it down the hill like I originally planned and get the John Deere to pull it out the rest of the way. Alright, I'm going to leave it right there and let the bigger tractor deal with it. Let me take down a couple more trees and then maybe get to where the bigger tractor can get to those. And we'll be done. You look at that last tree right there, see how it kind of goes up the hill and then kind of bends back over. That's going to be a wedge job for sure. And So when I do my escape route, I have to plan as if that tree can go either way, forward or back. As much as I want it to go forward, when you have that much weight, it can decide to do pretty much what it wants. And we're not going to really know what we have until we get into that tree. And the other thing is, see, since it's a little bit on a hillside, I might be able to rotate my open face a little bit to take advantage of that downhill. You know, more of a upcut style of a cut too, and maximize more of that tree, you know. And we're going to use a little 562 with a 28-inch bar. I'm not lacking for power with that saw. Yeah, you have to finesse it. You can't hog it like you can the big G395. But I think you'll see that tree comes right down. It doesn't care how big the saw was. It took it. It's still going to hit the ground. So anyway, here we go. ran it out of gas. I don't know how much that camera got, but the funny thing is I got more trees out of the G395 than I did out of this little saw. But the G395 has a much bigger fuel tank, so miles per gallon, I don't know. So anyway, I'll fuel it up, cut that log out, push the log out of the way, go get the other tractor to start skidding. But you don't need to have that on camera, that's pretty much common sense. But what is relevant is to all those who would say the 562 is too small a saw for a 28. Well, for me, I like it. It works okay. I'd rather have my 565, there is no doubt. And there's no way it's cutting as fast as that beast. But while the 565 is probably my best combination in terms of weight, power, fuel efficiency, and all that, you know, you're down a little bit of power. I don't think I'm quite as fuel efficient, but I don't know. You'd have to measure the actual volume of fuel. But what I did take away is, for whatever reason, that saw right there is very fuel efficient for what it is. Or it's just got a big giant tank. But I got 3 trees of the same basic caliber where I have to do cleanup and cut them out on that pretty much on a regular basis. And I only could get 1 out of the 288. And I know that's not something specific where there's a number attached, because there's so many different variables involved. Temperature of the fuel, how much time it idles, how much cleanup work there is, all that crap. But that's just sort of a rule of thumb that I've gone by. You know, kind of averages out. So take a look at that cut. Let's get a look at that stump. I was talking about this a couple of videos back, but this is really the first time I could show it. Is when I'm on the hillsides like this and I'm cutting downhill, I can have less, you know, of the log involved with the face cut and do more down the hill like that, because I have the room to do so. And yet again, on these trees, I cut the flare off here. It was pulling down into the log because, yet again, I had a little bit of a higher back cut. And this stuff isn't that stringy to get from the get-go. It's not like ash. And that's not the best log. Look at that brown stuff in there. You know, I don't know what I'm going to have when I get up in there. That log, by the way, was really nice. I was very surprised. But I was able to do the same thing on that one down there, where I could come up on the bottom of the face cut. Again, always looking to maximize, you know, how much of the log I can take. And, you know, sometimes you get more, sometimes you get less. But if you always shoot to do that, you pick up a few inches here, a few inches there. You notice how high it was back there, so that pretty much determined how low my back cut was going to be. Right? There you go. Let me get some fuel in that little thing, cut the saw log out, push it out of the way, and go back and get the International and get this stuff out of here. So to the show us your stumps crowd, 28-inch bar on 562. There's one down there. There's that one. There's this one. And it actually did just fine.